Hi, in this video we are going to look at replacing this power steering pump on a 2014 Range Rover Sport with the 5.0 supercharged engine. This is located on the driver's side of the vehicle on a US left-hand drive vehicle. So when you open up the hood, you should see it on the right hand side of the engine, but to get to it you're going to have to remove the radiator fan and the radiator fan assembly. And I also found that it was easiest to get to it if you removed the driver's side front wheel and the plastic liner that goes inside the engine, although that might not be the case for everyone. I just came across the fact that there was 3 bolts holding this in, and one of them was actually holding it in from the back end, which I am not entirely sure is the normal way of having it on, because this is the first one I've removed. But the only way to get to that bolt was through the wheel well. If they're all 3 bolts are on the front, then you probably won't need to do that. But that worked for me. So that's the job. Let's get into it. With the airbox out of the way, we can remove this piece here. So you can see there's a couple of bolts. We're not going to remove those, I don't think. But underneath this hose, so let's see if I can get it from this angle. There it is. There is a little torque nut that holds this assembly in front of the engine. So we're going to just take this whole assembly thing off by removing this pipe and then pushing this out of the way, and the starter motor is underneath there. So I've got an extended torque bit that I've found is the right one. It's going to go underneath the 2 hoses that are kind of fixed in place and are not going to go anywhere, and it's coming out. And I got to make sure I have my other hand free to grab that when it gets loose. So let's stop the video real quick. Okay, next I'm going to remove this cooling hose line, because this bit now is kind of like free to move, but I had to remove this hose clamp, or at least push it down. So the hose clamp was here, I just pushed it down. I'm going to have to remove this coupling here, because this line also goes into this cooling line coupling thing. So that's going to have to be there's a little clip there, and obviously someone's put a zip tie on it, so I'll have to try to remember to put a zip tie there when I get back. Presumably that's to stop this from moving around. And then it's going to be a case of removing bolts that look like this torque bolt. There's 3 of them. There's one here, and then there's one that's the trickiest to get to, which is to back there. But with enough extensions, that shouldn't be too difficult to get to. Then we should be able to remove this whole section here. So let's get this thing out of the way. Okay, making a little bit of progress. I pulled off this hose here from this plastic coupling. We're going to have to be careful not to break this. This is a plastic coupling that is mounted into the side of the engine, so we've got to make sure we don't break that plastic coupling off. So I was very carefully to remove this hose. Once I got that hose off, I realized that the reason it was zip tied was because it's got to basically hold it in place to stop this thing from popping out of the engine block. Also underneath it is the next hose clamp that we're going to need to get to. So there is a hose clamp down there. We're going to remove this. You can see that I've already broken this one free, and that should allow me to wiggle this out of the way, or we'll see. By the way, I'm going to make a note of this later, but when we put this all back together again, we're going to have to make sure we do not put the intake plenum on, because this is the drain that lets the air out of the radiator system. So once this is the highest point for coolant, so once we've broken open the system, there's going to be air in the lines. We need to get that air out, we need to bleed it out. So we're going to have to actually make sure we bleed the air out using this, which we won't be able to do if we've got the air intake plenum on top, because that mounts over the top of this. Or at least I don't think you can do it, but I'm just going to try and bleed the air out using this without the intake plenum on, and that should be fine. I just won't have the air intake boxes on, so we won't run it for very long. All right, let's get back to it. So I took out the fan belt, and that's going to give us a lot more room. In order to do that, I had to use a fan belt removal tool and a 36mm wrench, which allows you to unscrew this nut on the back of the fan belt, which when you're looking from above is going to be mounted in that direction, and you've got to get that wrench onto there while using this tool to keep the clutch in place. Once you do that, you get so much more room here, and you can see now that we've got to get to this, the power steering pump down there, which still plan is to get all of this coolant piping out of the way, but we're made ourselves a lot more room now, and once these hoses are out the way, this should be relatively straightforward. There is an electrical connector for the fan belt. It's located underneath a plastic cover that you have here that actually just comes off. That's this thing. This actually just pulls off. It's not actually screwed in, unless I didn't have any screws there. And then once you've done that, you get access to a plug. The plug is here, and you just take that plug off. But it's actually a relatively straightforward job. So now we'll get back to removing this big cooling pipe, which is going to make me lose a whole lot of coolant. Okay, so this is where we are. I wasn't able to get this hose off because it's kind of welded itself onto the manifold, so I decided to try and attack it at the other end. So I got the other end of this hose off here. Finally remembered what this thing is that I kept calling the coolant hoses, and it's actually this is the thermostat. So in order to get this out of the way, the only thing holding it back right now is, you can see I've disconnected this hose here, which has a hose clip on it. I've disconnected this connector. The only thing holding it back is this wiring harness is held on in multiple places, and I've got to disconnect it. Once I've disconnected that, I'll be able to disconnect this from the whole thermostat assembly, and then yank the thermostat assembly out of the way. So that's it. Okay, so I've pushed the thermostat assembly down to essentially down to the bottom of the engine, and now I can get to the pulley. And as you can see, I've removed the belt, and to do that, I attached a breaker bar to this tensioner and pushed it towards the well, I'm looking at the front of the car, towards the right of the car. That took the tension off, and then with my other hand I got the belt off. Okay, so now we have access to the front pulley of the power steering pump. I am going to see if I can get that off. With the pulley off, there's going to be, well, this is what you're going to see, and you're going to see 3 bolts that look like this. They're in a triangle shape, one here, one to the left, and one underneath. So there's going to be one that you're not going to be able to see too clearly from here, but they're fairly accessible, because you can see that now that we've moved the thermostat out of the way, we've got room here to remove the bolt. However, even when you do that, you'll notice that the pulley, the power steering pump won't come off. And I guess the easiest way to show why that is the case is to show the new pump that I've got. So the new pump is here, and you can see the 3 bolt holes. Put it down. 1, 2, and 3, and the pump is orientated in approximately that location, or in that orientation. This is the hose that's going to come down from the filling reservoir. That one's just hose clamped on, pretty easy to take off. This one to take off requires a pretty complicated arrangements of extensions. I can show you that real quick because I've already done it. So I had to use all sorts of weird angles and extensions to get a large, I think it was a 23mm bolt down between these 2 lines. Now these are metal lines, so you can't just kind of grab them and move them out of the way, but you can get an extension bar down there, and you should just be able to get that off. And so that's going to allow you to remove the high pressure high pressure hose. I have it knocking around here. Here's what the high pressure hose looks like. There's the bolt. It's got a metal tube coming into it. That was down here, and when you undo that bolt there, then this pops right off, and now there's not really anything stopping us from getting that pump out, with the exception of one thing, and it's taken me a while to figure out how to get to that one thing. So I noticed that when I took off all 3 bolts, there was still something holding it in place, and it was wiggling backwards and forwards, but it would always rotate around a point, and that point was here on top of the pump. And so there's actually a bolt that goes in through the back here to here. Now, why in God's name Range Rover would put a bolt, or Land Rover would put a bolt that goes through the back of the pump so that you can't possibly get it off is beyond me. But the solution is the wheel. Get the wheel off, get the wheel arch cover off, and now you can see the power steering pump from the side, and the bolt we're going to get to I believe is right there. I could be pointing at it. No, it's not. It's up there. It's up at the top. But with this cover off, I can just about get to it. So that's the trick. Take off this plastic wheel liner. This thing, it's held on by a whole bunch of plastic clips and hex nuts. While you're at it, clean this out, because this is a prone area to rust on Range Rovers of this style, because crud that you drive through gets in behind the wheel well, goes down behind here, sits in there forever, and eventually will start to rot that out. This car's not really doing too bad. The last L320 I had did have rust here because of Michigan sand. So that's one of the things. There's also an electrical connector. I think that's part of the airbag deployment system. So if you remove that electrical connector, you're going to need to have some sort of diagnostic tool to reset it, and you're going to have to remove a couple of screws from underneath here to get it, because there's a couple of things holding it in. Even when you've got all the bolts, it's pretty tough to remove. I mean, not tough, but like you do have to pry it out a little bit, but it will come out. So now let's get to that bolt back there. That's going to be a two-handed job. So I'll tell you once I've got back there and got it out. So I've got the old pump out, and you can see it right next to the new pump. One conundrum I have is that there's only 3 bolts holding this in. I might have given the impression that it was 4 earlier, because I mentioned 3 in the front and 1 in the back. However, it appears that there's just 3. They're all the same, and for reasons that I don't fully understand, the 3rd one was mounted in the back, not in the front, which is why you can see that point there, that's the bolt I couldn't remove. I don't know why that one was mounted in the back when it could have just as easily been mounted from the front, and I wouldn't have had to take out the wheel arch to get to it. So when I put it back in again, I may not put that bolt in from the back. I might just put the 3 bolts in from the front and see how that works. I don't really see why it would be a problem. Then we'll be able to put the pulley on. Obviously I've got to get the low pressure line that goes from the filling reservoir off and put it on that one. That one's not too difficult. Once I've got it on, I'll be able to put it back into place, and then that hose is going to fit, screw into there with that 23mm nut that I said that was a real pain to get to because of the metal lines in the place in way. But it's doable. Now let's put it all back together again. Pump is now back on, and all 3 bolts are loosely in place. I've already got the hoses on, so I put the low pressure hose on first in the same orientation as the way it came off, and now that is fed. It's here, and it's fed underneath this braided hose here, which is part of the air conditioning system, I think. And the high pressure hose is back on again. So the high pressure hose, you see it bends around here, but that's because the pulley has to go into this position. So it's bent around, but everything is on, and I put the 3 bolts from the front. One thing that I did to make it easier to move the high pressure hose around is I took off the fastener bracket from underneath. So I found that there's a bracket here zoom out real quick. And yeah, there's a bracket that's held on by one, something like 8 or 9 millimeter bolt. And it goes up here somewhere. I've lost the exact spot, but it's around about here. That's actually it. So you see how that's loose, that was held on by there it is. So there. This is the high pressure brake line, the one that we just bolted onto the pump using the 23 millimeter socket. So I told you I had a difficulty getting that 23 millimeter socket onto the pump. It's possible I didn't really need to do that. I could have removed the pump. If I'd have known that there was one bolt in the back, I would have, and I couldn't figure out why the pump wouldn't get off. Once I got it off, the easiest thing when putting it back together again is to place the high pressure bolt onto the pump, tighten it down nice and tight in the orientation that it came off, so that there's that U-bend that goes around the pulley, and you can have a little bit more slack in that pipe by removing that one bracket. So that is why I did that. Now I've got to get all the other stuff back together, including all the coolant hoses and the thermostat and things like that. When you're putting the pulley back on, make sure you've got the pin pointing outwards. If you're not quite sure, you can probably see the marks that were made by the triangle shaped thing on the back of the pump. That should line up with the triangle shaped stain that's on the back of the pulley. And you should see this, the rubbing marks where these bolts have pushed against the front side of the pulley. And it's a little bit tricky to line it up, so just try to get one of the bolts in place. And there's, on my pulley, there are 6 bolt holes. You're going to use 3 of them. Make sure you use every other one, and you should feel some resistance as each of the 3 bolts screws in. And of course, you're only going to be able to get them finger tight at this point, and you're going to need a breaker bar type system. I think we talked about using I used the bar that I used to remove the radiator fan. That's actually going to keep one of the bolts in place while I tighten the other one, because obviously when you try and turn this, this thing is going to spin. As you can tell, the pump is turning. The old one did as well. I'm not 100% sure there's a problem with it, but you can see that the belt lines up with it perfectly. And we're going to use the belt tensioner to push the belt to the right of the car when looking from the front, passenger side in the US, and get it to go across there, which is not going to be able to be possible until we've cranked down on that bench, on that pulley. So that's going to be next, and then it's going to be putting all the hoses in. Okay, so I've got my breaker bar onto the pulley tensioner, and now it's just a case of pulling it as far over to the side as I can, and then trying to get the belt over the pulley, which is easier said than done. Almost. There we go. Whew. Oh, and I got to get it over the bottom one as well. Sorry if you can only see my head here, but okay. I think I might have done it. Oh, okay, that's it. So just an extension, and then it's a 1/2 inch. So I used a 1/2 inch to 3/4 inch breaker bar on that, and the pulley goes along the top of here, underneath, and then onto the alternator. Hopefully not too much brake fluid and coolant fluid on that, but yep, should work. So I had pushed this thermostat assembly down to the bottom of the engine bay. Now pulling it back up again, you can see that I have to get this hose attached to this permanent coolant manifold here. I got to get this hose here connected onto the thermostat assembly. I got this little plastic nipple thing to attach I've got these things that I clipped out of the side to somehow attach there. And then this one went onto the back of the intake manifold. Oh, and I needed to get a zip tie to hold this in place now that we realized it was plastic and it could move around. But it's going to be just forcing these tubes around until I get them all lined up, and then putting all the hose clamps back in the right place. And that shouldn't take too long, so I'm going to get to work on that, and I probably won't show you because it will just be me frustratingly moving tubes around. Okay, let's do a quick review of all the stuff we've got into the correct position. We have this thermostat hose on. That one was never actually taken off, but at this end it was, and so that is now in position. The smaller hose down in here is in position, and it has the hose clamp on it. This one came off, that one has the hose clamp on it. This was uncoupled, that one's coupled back together again and loose. Oh, I gotta fix that. This is back on and zip tied back into position. The bottle is back stuck together, and this is going to clip onto the side of the airbox, which will be here, but we haven't put the airbox in yet. So airbox has to go back in, fix this. This airbox never came out. The manifold has to go in, and that one's pretty straightforward. But before we do that, the next one is the fan. So I've got to get the fan on. There was an electrical connector down there that's connected, and there's an electrical connector here. This is for the fan, so just got to drop the fan into there, attach it to this, and use my special wrench to tighten that up, and that should be it. Okay, so that's pretty much it, job done. I've just got to put a few trim pieces back together here. So the cover that goes over the fan, I pushed the airbox back in. It's just a kit. This is real simple. It's just a case of pushing the tube that goes into the side of the car here through the little rubber grommet, and then sliding this foot into position, and that's the only thing holding it in place is basically rubber stoppers. Then you can slide this back into position. Once we've got the fan cover on, it's going to be just a case of putting the manifold back on, which clearly goes like down into there. And then you've got these connectors that go from the side of the air manifold into the airboxes, one on each side. I don't think they're different, but I did keep them separated just in case. And that should be pretty much it. So this job did take me a little bit longer than I was hoping, but wasn't really that bad once I figured out that I could access the back of the steering pump through the wheel well. You might not have to do that if the 3 bolts were in the front, which I kind of suspect they were supposed to be. Then you actually don't need that step. But for mine, for whatever reason, maybe this has been worked on before, I had that. One last little point is I do have a few little wires that have little clips like this that I have to find a place for, and there's little plastic spots on the side of the airbox, so I guess it's that. But that's it pretty much. So hopefully you find this useful. I couldn't find a video on how to change the power steering pump on a L320 Range Rover, so hopefully this works for you. Thanks, bye. Okay, one last edit before I go. It turns out that hose that I was trying to put into here doesn't fit, because that doesn't go there. It fits into this little connector here, and that is now secure. This one actually goes into the back of the manifold, so it will connect there. So that's why that didn't work, but hopefully now we're done. Thanks, bye.